So the purpose of today's session is to inspire you to start to be engaged with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We'll give you some pointers on how you might do that. And for those of you who've already started, there might be some things in here to help you take some next steps. So I first heard about the Sustainable Development Goals back in November 2015. My colleague Belinda sent me an email about their launch. And in the interest of full transparency, my initial reaction was, oh my Lord, where do you start with that? Surely not another approach to sustainability that we're all going to need to get our heads around. I had 1,000,001 other things on my to-do list, and I'm afraid to say I deleted her email. So you can imagine my relief when I discovered that this was a similar experience for other sustainability practitioners. So a few months later at SBC, we were working on our strategy, and this was the first real interaction that the team had with the SDGs. So we worked through all 17 goals, all 169 targets. We mapped how our current work aligned, and also how the work that we knew our members were doing aligned as well. And it was great to see that actually quite a lot was being done by members, and activity has absolutely increased in the last year. So well done to you all. You're all kind of doing it in different ways. So for us, there's no one how. So the purpose of today is to just share with you some experiences and some ideas about what your how might be. And it's my absolute pleasure to be able to introduce Kate Badeau, who's the Chief Risk Officer at Vector. She is going to take you through some of the ways that she and the Vector team have been engaging with the SDGs. Please welcome Kate.
Thanks, Kate, and thanks for inviting me to speak today. I'm really thrilled to be part of the discussion on how Vector's been working and embedding the SDGs. We've been talking about them in our business for about the last 12 months or so, and trying to figure out how do they fit within our business strategy and our business context, and how we can embed them into our business thinking. Of course, how we embed is going to be different to how all you would like to embed, because it's really dependent on your culture within your business, your aspirations around the goals, and the leadership approach you'd like to take. And whilst we feel like we always have heaps more to do, I'm hoping that some of the tips and sort of practical tricks I can show you today will help you on your journey. So in the time we've got together this morning, and I'm already putting my hand up to say I'm taking more than my allotted time, and I'm sorry for that. There's always so much to say. I'm going to cover off quickly why there's value in looking at the goals, but I think I've got a pretty converted audience, so I'll run through those first couple of slides pretty rapidly. I'm going to spend a bit of time talking to you about how we started engaging with our board and had that discussion at the most senior level, and I think that might be the most interesting for you. And then I'll talk a little bit about how we started to align it within our business frameworks and business processes. So we can't have a talk about the SDGs without putting up the obligatory slide. I think you're probably all pretty familiar with it, but just as context, the goals represent the current complex challenges facing society, such as poverty, environmental degradation and inequality. They also address the need for full and combined attention of government, civil society and business to address these challenges. And I think why the goals have resonated so well is that they do provide a really simple global framework for all parties to align to, regardless of your size, your wealth or your geographic location. And they also lay down a great plan for creating partnerships, and it's those partnerships that we're going to need and the collaboration that we're going to need to be successful in solving the goals. And as you would all know, business as a source of innovation, finance, economic growth and employment, we have a critical role to play in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So just quickly turning to kind of value, as a framework, the SDGs for me deliver three kind of really valuable benefits. They clearly establish what the key environmental, social and economic issues are for society. They set out a pathway for clear ambition and really underscore that importance of collaboration. And they give business, government and NGOs a really common language to have that discussion. So looking at the key issues, the 17 goals have a lot of detail underneath them, and Kate referenced that in her intro. And they articulate a really full range of the social and environmental goals that need to be addressed, and we've put a range of them up in that slide. Given the issues are so well defined, It really enables business to move quickly towards thinking about solutions, and I think that's really key when you're thinking about the goals. And most importantly, how to connect your core business activities with the solutions that you can deliver in terms of achieving the goals. You'll see later in our approach how we've reviewed our business in the context of Vector's ability to deliver solutions to help achieve the goals, both looking at our ability to impact and our ability to create value. In terms of ambition, the goals set a really clear level of ambition for all parties. I don't know if you've all seen that report, but that's kind of like my Bible for looking at the SDGs. And there's another companion kind of report, which is the CEO's Guide to the SDGs. Just as an aside, I gave my whole board a copy of that report to read, and my chairman sent me an email saying, "Thank you, this is the best document I've read in the last 5 years, and it's completely changed my mind on how I'm framing my thinking around the SDGs." So if you haven't shared it with your board, I'd highly recommend that you do that. Just quoting from the report says, over the next 15 years, sustainability will become as big and disruptive in every sector as digital technologies have become over the past 15 years. So just think about that quote for a minute. That's a pretty massive type of disruption. And so for us as a business, particularly in our sector, which is both faced with disruption and is embracing it, the concept of disruptive sustainability is something that we can relate to very positively. And the challenge for all business is to use the SDGs to both set a new level of ambition for your organisation, but also to create a competitive advantage, rather than just waiting for the disruptive to occur and trying to take action when it's way too late. And the goals require the businesses to set targets out to 2030 and with an ambition to set targets out to 2050, and that's really not an easy thing to do. And I'd say we really haven't cracked all of that yet. But it does mean that the goals are naturally more ambitious as businesses have longer to achieve them, and the long-term timeframes can also provide a really useful model for growth. Probably the thing I like best about the goals is that the framework really is very simple and provides a common language and also a common set of images to clearly explain what the goals are to everybody. So the images on this slide and all the images actually that we've put in the presentation are from the toolkit that you can get online. The language cuts across government, business and NGOs, and it removes a lot of the sustainability jargon. It's so much easier in your business to have conversations about clean and affordable energy or inequality than GRI and natural capitals. They're so easily understood by people in the business. And before we even agreed on what our priority goals were, we were referring to the SDGs in kind of, a really sort of soft way within our business presentations. And they really resonated very easily with our people, and there were very kind of few explanations that we needed to give. They're just very tangible and easy to understand straight up. So engaging with the board, now despite what that visual might infer, you don't need to dream of having superhero powers to be able to get your board on side. I'm just going to run through you a couple of the tools that we use, which I think might be useful for you. So we started engaging our board last December at our sustainability subcommittee with an explanation of what the goals were. And they loved the donut, and we loved the donut, as the donut placed each of the goals into their categories pretty easily of environment, society and economy. And I think presenting the goals in that way really helped our sort of more cynical directors at that time on the board, who were concerned that the SDGs were all a bit fluffy and just about the environment. But when they could see that there was a strong connection to economy, and society was quite a well-known conversation at our board level, because we did discuss a lot of societal issues. But when they could see that there was a real direct connection to business, they felt a lot more comfortable and started to listen a little bit more intently. I think another thing which really smoothed the way for our discussion in our business was there's a really close nexus between how we talk about risk and sustainability. And I look after both those areas, so it's easy to happen in Vector in that way. And I've sanitised this slide a bit because I couldn't put out exactly what the risks were. I've given you categories. But as you can see in the left-hand side there, we talk about external trends and global megatrends that are impacting on our risk profile. And if you look at the language of those, there's a lot of correlation between that language and the language of the Sustainable Development Goals. So if you look at, in our external trends, climate change adaptation, directly related to SDG 13, climate action. Rising income and wealth disparity, or Auckland affordability, directly related to SDG 10, reduced inequality. Increased skill labour shortage, SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. And shifting customer base preferences and expectations significantly relates to SDG 11, smart cities and communities. So the board were kind of comfortable in the dialogue through the risk process, which made the introduction of the SDGs a little bit easier. And I know it's just a little thing, but even colour coding the risk to have environmental, economic, social also helps. So every little sort of thing that you can do around correlating those dialogues in the business, I think is really useful at the board level. I think the next iteration of this slide will be, when we go back and do our material risk report in another 6 months, we'll have the SDGs mapped on the other side of that diagram so that there's a definite and obvious correlation. Just to give you a quote from the Better Business, Better World report again, it says if social and environmental indicators don't improve in the next 5 to 15 years, i.e. some of the risks, what's most likely is a strengthening popular backlash against business and increasingly drastic regulatory responses from governments. So you can use the risk profile also to show the impact of inaction against the SDGs as well. And you can see we have political and regulatory uncertainty as both a key trend and a risk on our profile. Just moving from the risk space, we use the Better Business, Better World report to also help explain that there are some significant business opportunities for those businesses willing to step up and address the goals. So we highlighted some of the opportunities that were relevant to Vector, and this again is taken out of that Better Business, Better World report, so you can see it's really been a Bible for us. And there are a whole heap of other examples that you can draw out of there for different sectors. But we highlighted things such as electric and hybrid vehicles, smart metering, energy storage systems and energy efficiency. And we discussed with the board that it's clear that companies who can deliver solutions and take advantage of opportunities will be able to better manage their risks, anticipate consumer demand, build positions in growth markets, secure access to needed resources and strengthen their supply chains whilst putting the world on a more sustainable and inclusive growth path. By the way, I love kids, so please keep the baby in the room. Don't feel bad at all. To demonstrate that the goals were starting to be understood in New Zealand, we then referenced the Colmar-Brunton Better Futures report. And this was useful context for the growing concern both around social issues, but also had a specific set of questions around the goals themselves. And you can see there between 60 and 80% of Kiwis rate each goal as being very important. And the numbers there you can see for yourself. This report was done in 2016. I would potentially say that when it's done again in 2017, you'll see even a bit more further uptick of those numbers on those goals. And I think it's really useful to use credible external research and experts to bring to your board and to help bring your board on a journey. Probably one of the most impactful things that we did was send our board on a course. So the Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership have a non-executive directors course which they run in Melbourne every year. It's a day and a half. That was just so valuable for us in terms of getting the board all on one page. All the strategic initiatives and information that we had been presenting were kind of reinforced on steroids by leading international experts, scientists, economists, policymakers, bankers and business leaders. And some of you might remember Professor Will Steffen, who we brought out earlier in the year. And he shared his expertise on climate change and a sense of urgency. Experts like Will had a profound impact on our board. And just really, particularly in that sense of the urgency and the role of business, that sort of international expertise is pretty priceless. So next, the Vector board became very ambitious and they kind of wanted to take action on everything all at once, but we didn't feel like that was going to be really manageable for our business, and we needed to sort of take a little step back so it didn't feel too overwhelming for the people at the business level. And so we agreed to narrow down the list and come up with a set of priority goals which we would focus on in the short to medium term. Now that doesn't mean that all the goals aren't important to us, because they are, but we just needed to have a narrow set to focus on initially. So when it came to prioritising, there were two kind of clear parameters driving our thinking. Firstly, how much impact could Vector have on a goal? And then secondly, what was the value proposition for Vector in tackling the goal? So we just used a 1 to 5 scale, and we adopted scales that we already had in the business, looking at our risk and opportunity frameworks and other business scales. And we assessed things like our ability to impact in terms of the role our products and our services have, the way we operate within our business, an assessment of the impact our supply chain has, what we could achieve through the management of our people, our potential investor impact and impact through our relationships with our community. And in respect to value, we considered what pursuing the goal could mean for Vector, and we looked at what new markets could open up or where we could create new products or services. Would it enable us to better attract our new talent or retain our existing talent? What would it do to costs and revenue? How would it impact on our reputation? And what might be the impact on our share price? And so after that sort of analysis, we ended up with a scatter diagram with 2 axes looking at value and impact. Now, this is as much as an art as it is a science, but it still provides you with a reasonably robust guide for deciding which goals to narrow in on. And we still had robust discussions about this in our business. Health and wellbeing was one that was kind of on the edge for us initially, but if you looked at the strong correlation between energy poverty and poor health outcomes, for Vector it made sense within the context of our business that we could make a difference, so that was re-rated. We also considered that the goal helped back our internal focus on wellbeing, and given we have such a strong health and safety focus in the context of us being a major hazard facility and a major hazard business, it just felt really wrong to leave it off the list, so we were able to re-rate it. The ones in blue, just for clarification, partnership for the goals and peace, justice and strong institutions, we just put those blue because we thought they cut across kind of as fundamental underpinning goals. And just to reiterate, we're not saying that all the goals aren't important, but this was where we felt our business could have the best impact the most quickly. And as you know, many of the goals are interrelated, so achieving an impact on one goal can have a flow-on effect impact on many others. Then we gave, in our presentation to the board, so they had the sort of analysis that the methods that we used and then the scatter diagram. Then we went into detail on each individual goal and we provided them a couple of slides on each one. Again, this has been sanitised, I haven't included all the detail in there, but you can see we sort of positioned where the goal was rated during our analysis, and we covered off things like what are we already doing that aligns to the goals? What else could we be doing? Who are the other players? And so, do you want to play in an area where there's already great stuff being done and the impact is kind of minimised? You want to look for the sweet spots where you can have a big impact, and who might we collaborate with? Again, this gave a really commercial context to the discussion at the board and continued to help ease that kind of potential fear of this is all just about fluffy environmental and social stuff. There was real business benefits and opportunities in us looking at the goals. And then we did a lot of research, the team, did a lot of research around giving the board practical perspectives on how there was already companies working to achieve the goals and what that could look like in a real business sense. And so for every goal we had that previous slide of what we're doing, what more can we do, backed up by a case study. And this particular technology, if you look at the array of things, it's a pretty cool case study which collects data from nodes across the city of Chicago, and that data works to provide social and environmental benefits. So putting things in context for our board was really important. So we came up with what we call Vector 6+1. So the 6 goals that we're going to focus on: affordable and clean energy, climate action, good health and wellbeing, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable business and communities. And the one is the partnerships, because we see that underpinning everything that we do. And we've kind of talked about those in our business in 2 key themes: transition to a low carbon economy and inequality. And so for an energy company, goals related to low carbon and new technology are quite obvious. But as new technologies become commonplace, and we need to ensure that these are accessible to everybody in our society, and we need to take all people in our communities and our journeys with us, that's where the goals around inequality and wellbeing really become important for us. It also aligns to our unique ownership structure. You may or may not know that Vector is 75% owned by a community trust called Entrust, so that creates an even stronger link and alignment with the social issues. Sorry, I'm moving quite at pace. Hoping I'm getting to my time. So our next step was to see how the goals could be aligned in the context of our ordinary everyday business activities and our sustainability frameworks. So you can see there, and I won't go through all of this detail, we position the goals as being the aspirational part of our framework, and these become part of our basis for our strategic focus areas going forward, while the rest of the framework kind of guides our day-to-day activity. And I think it's really important to mention at the base of our framework, we've included the UN Global Compact. So these set the minimum principles around doing no harm. I think there's a real danger if business just focuses on the SDGs themselves, that you kind of could get into the trap of ignoring the foundations of corporate responsibility, and that could fall by the wayside. And we see that's really important as part of a robust sustainability framework to concentrate on both all those fundamental pieces that you need to do to embed, but also have those aspirational targets that you're reaching for. And the other aspects of the framework is just how we align our internal sustainability work. So embedding sustainability in our business, creating transformation, being a leader and telling our story, and then the guiding principles are those adopted by the British Standard on Sustainability. So then we developed this kind of strategic approach. So the goals are a core aspect of what we've considered in developing our strategic focus areas. And we've landed on 4 key areas, and they're kind of at 4 layers. There's a customer layer, a community layer, an industry layer, and a global layer. So at the customer level, our focus is on clean and affordable energy, and that links directly to SDG 7. However, there's also strong linkage to health and wellbeing due to the connection between energy poverty and poor health outcomes, and likewise a link to climate change as we provide customers choice to increase the proportion of zero carbon electricity generation via things like solar. Our focus at the community level is on resilience. This includes building resilience in our workforce, our infrastructure and our communities. It's a key aspect of SDG 11, which seeks to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient and sustainable. And there's also a connection to climate action and reducing inequalities. For our industry, we are committed to championing sustainability through our supply chain and pursuing a cradle-to-cradle approach, particularly for the components of the new energy future. And this supports aspects of SDG 11, but also the SDG around responsible consumption. And finally, at a world or global level, Vector is pushing for rapid transition to a low or zero carbon world. And our efforts to tackle our own emissions and contribute to reducing emissions from both the energy and transport sectors align with the intents of Goals 7 and 13. And for each of these focus areas, we expect to be collaborating across business, government and NGOs in line with Goal 17. So following this, we're now working on a set of targets out to 2030 and also shorter timeframe targets and a range of initiatives that are going to help us contribute to reaching the goals. So this is where we're at. It's not a completed product yet. It's still a work in progress. You would see that in relation to our planet, we've got a 2030 goal around net zero carbon, and we announced that a week or so ago. It's something that we're really proud of. And there's also another range of aspirational goals in there. Some areas we don't have anything. That's because we still need to do work this year and maybe even next year to understand what that 2030 goal could look like. Technology is moving so quickly in our space. We still need to do some pilot initiatives. For example, peer-to-peer trading, we're in the second phase of our pilot for that. That will have a big impact on what our 2030 goal will look like for affordable and clean energy. So I think it's okay to have an evolution in this process. And there's also heaps of initiatives I haven't put up there because we didn't want to crowd out the slide too much. One of the other things which I'm really proud of, and I need to say, is that on Monday we were accredited as the first large corporate living wage employer in New Zealand. So of course, thank you. So that clearly relates to our approach to around resilient people and resilient communities, and lines with both the SDG 11 but also 10, reducing inequalities. So this is going to evolve over time, and happy to have discussions about how we're evolving this in due course. Sort of getting to the end, this is just a range of extracts from our annual report. So incorporating the global goals into formal reporting is becoming increasingly widespread, and ourselves and a number of other businesses who are SBC members made reference to the goals in this year's annual report. I think the energy sector is doing really well. Meridian and Mercury also had great sort of reports and alignment to the goals. I think Air New Zealand does as well. So we included a section on each of the 7 priority goals for us and how they fit with our business, as well as making the connection to relevant goals for each of the case studies included in the report. And so for the first time we started talking about social imperatives as well as commercial imperatives, which I think is really, really important in the context of delivering the story on the SDGs. And going forward, as we increase our focus on non-financial reporting and consider shifting to more integrated reporting, we'll look to connect specific outcomes with the global goals in that way as well. So just to conclude, the goals have become a really important focus point as we move towards achieving our vision of creating a new energy future. And I've talked about the value of the goals in terms of understanding the key issues really quickly, providing a basis for ambition for business, and also providing that common language that's just really accessible at the business level. Engaging with the board, my tips would be to highlight the significant business opportunities that are emerging in the space and really make that commercial connection for your directors. Undertake a deep analysis of how addressing the goals creates real value, and utilise that international and external expertise. Don't underestimate the power of an external voice in reinforcing the messages that you're giving on a day-to-day basis. And finally, when aligning the goals to business, keep in mind that the goals represent an aspirational target, but it's great to have great aspirations. Balance these with solid foundations of sustainable business practices, and start building the goals into all of your internal and external communications really early on. It's so important to tell the story. That's it.
Thank you so much, Kate, for sharing all of those insights with us. We are going to have some time for questions for Kate, but we're not going to do that just yet. I'm just going to take you through a few more ways that members have been engaging with the goals, just to keep it moving forward. So, as Kate mentioned, raising awareness with your management team or your board is really important. Think about the key things that they need to know. Don't try and cover everything at once. Be clear on why the SDGs are an important framework. They enable us to show how business can contribute to the planet's sustainability strategy to 2030 and provide us with a lens through which we can translate global needs and ambitions into business solutions. The Kates concur that this is a Bible, and this guide is really useful as well. It's pitched to CEOs, but the messages can be consistently used at different hierarchies throughout the business. Stakeholder engagement and materiality. So if you're currently thinking about doing this particular sustainable business practice, there's a way that you can connect to the goals in this process as well. So we've seen members like 3R and Westpac use the SDGs as a lens in their materiality process. They've asked their stakeholders to rank the SDGs in terms of importance for them, but also identify the ones which they think the business should focus on. SBC's pre-election brief survey asked members to name their top 3 SDGs, and you told us climate action, decent work and economic growth, and no poverty. And this was not a huge surprise to us. We know that the transition to a low emissions economy is your top priority. Goal 8, decent work and economic growth, includes targets on how you decouple economic growth from environmental degradation. And of course, no poverty is about making sure that no one gets left behind. And our members appreciate that business can't succeed in societies that fail. Interesting that our survey of you guys as members, your top 3 was quite different from the Colmar-Brunton survey. So important to think about different stakeholders and how they're ranking goals. So how to align your strategy and work programs. A lot of the guidance tells us that you shouldn't pick winners. You should think about the SDGs because they're also interlinked with each other. As Kate said, even with a board who are like, yep, we want to do everything, give us everything, it's easier said than done. It's too much all at once. So it is really important to identify priority goals that align with your strategic themes, link to current work programs, and this is particularly true when a business is coming up to speed with embedding sustainability anyway. So Kate has shared lots of approaches on how you map initiatives, assess impact, and undertake strategic alignment. We'll make sure that you get these slides so that you can access these resources and see that information. I should just mention the SDG Compass. This is the official tool. It's a 5-step process to understand the goals, map areas of impact, set your own goals, integrate them, and communicate them. I personally have found it quite a difficult guide to use, but lots of members are telling me that they are using it successfully, so It's not for everyone, but it might be for you. Step 2 involves mapping your value chain, which is a huge task in itself. But the good news is that SBC developed a value chain guide. It's an online tool. We did that a couple of years ago, so that will actually step you through the process of using your value chain. We know that the SDGs in the value chain are really important. So if you do decide to look at SDGs in your value chain, there are a huge number of resources for how you could do that. Examples include the Forestry Stewardship Council's tool and the SDG industry matrices. So these outline how existing initiatives and accreditations can support your SDG efforts in your value chain. They're just making it really easy for businesses to make those connections. And SDG 17, Partnerships for the Goals, has been intentionally developed because we'll only achieve the SDGs through working together. So think about your current partnerships. Use the SDGs in a conversation with your current partners to reconfirm what your shared objectives are. And could they actually be scaled up to be more in line with global objectives and outcomes that the SDGs talk about? And I love this platform, the Partnerships for the SDGs online platform. It's just got heaps of examples of partnerships. It's a really good source of ideas, and you can search by the SDG that you're most interested in to pull up different examples. Abby just said it's like Tinder for the SDGs. And step 5, if you're about to report, think about how the SDGs could turn up in your report. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development's 5th Reporting Matters has reviewed the sustainability and integrated reports of 157 companies from 35 countries. And it found that 79% of reports acknowledged the SDGs in some way. So if you're working on your next report, what's the easiest way that you can reference them? Even just stating that they're on your radar will help contribute to the awareness raising that we need to do across New Zealand businesses and New Zealand communities. Both GRI and Integrated Reporting have released guidance on how to use the SDGs in their frameworks. For Sustainable Business Council, we've been trying to use mainstream media to raise awareness on the SDGs. It's been a key focus. So back in August, Renee successfully pitched an 18-part weekly series on the SDGs to the Fairfax Media Sunday business editor. And the idea was that each article would cover one goal. We worked with them so that their research was complemented by our knowledge of what businesses were doing to implement the SDGs. I think we're kind of in this really interesting catch-22 where we're trying to raise visibility of them, but because there's not a lot of media coverage about them, media are reluctant to pick them up, so help. Reference the SDGs wherever possible, start making them real for people, and this is going to be even more important with the new government, who are using a lot of these themes in their own storytelling. Our pre-election brief to all the major parties outlined using the SDGs as a framework for how we want to work with the incoming government. So it's great to see that the newly released agreement between Labour and the Green Party states that it supports a transformative government which implements the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Whoop, whoop. So what they've done is they've outlined a number of priorities to progress implementation for the SDGs. And so we feel like we do actually have this genuine, huge opportunity to get a more joined up way of working across all sectors on outcomes for the next 3 years to 2030. So just in terms of next steps for us, our recent Future Leaders programme looked at leadership for the Sustainable Development Goals. We had 2 main objectives. We wanted to build the leadership capability of our fabulous course participants, and we wanted to use their group work to apply their new skills to make recommendations on how we can mobilise action on the SDGs in New Zealand. which was a huge task, particularly given how complex the SDGs are. There's quite a lot of integration and crossover, so we were blown away by the group's research, reports, and presentations, and I just felt like I should share some of their recommendations with you. So SDG Group 7, Affordable and Clean Energy, the group developed a 7-point action plan to accelerate progress on energy efficiency and renewable energy for New Zealand. And it included SBC members making joint commitments together to scale renewable and clean energy technologies. Is anyone up for that? Anyone else? Both the SDG 9 group and the SDG 12 group, so industry, innovation and infrastructure, and sustainable consumption and production, they recommended strengthening connectivity to maximize collaboration as critical enablers to further their goals. So the idea is there's heaps of tools and resources and information out there that exist that support these outcomes. The thing that would mobilize the action is how we work together to deliver it. So multi-stakeholder collaboration is not easy, and we need to grow capability and create platforms to deliver shared outcomes. So SBC is currently exploring how we can help build members' capability on this through our leadership program, which Rob is leading. SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Precincts. So the group identified empowering youth as the best way to mobilize action. They developed an ongoing 3-year sustainability leadership program to grow capability for young people to lead others to take transformative steps. And around 40 students a year will build technical knowledge on the SDGs, develop open source solutions, and help their host business implement an SDG strategy. So the team need 15 businesses to make this happen and already have confirmation from a few. So the business will have to commit to supporting 2 to 3 senior students to be mentored in a sustainability context, house a 12-week summit internship placement, and be open to adopting some SDG solutions. There's an event scheduled for March next year, so if you're interested in finding out more about what this might mean for your business, please give your card to Sophie Hayway at the back. If you're on live stream, just type up your interest in the chat box and we'll make sure that you're connected. And finally, SDG Group 13 focused on climate action, and they explored a wide range of options to address this very important topic. They concluded that the biggest barrier is currently a lack of a compelling vision and a positive narrative on the transition to a low emissions economy and what it means for New Zealand business. So their presentation was set as an awards dinner in 2030, where they were accepting an awards acceptance speech made on behalf of Kiwi businesses to celebrate the achievement of a successful transition. And they backcasted the journey that they took to get them there. And it was so powerful and so compelling that we're going to develop their work into a format that can be widely distributed and used as a compelling vision to get people on this journey. And really excitingly, we have been involved with New Zealand's first national SDG Summit, Partnerships for Agenda 2030. The steering group is chaired by an SBC board member, Dr. Marianne van der Belt at Victoria University, and it embodies SDG 17 because it's a partnership made up of cross-sector representatives, including HUIA, AUT, Auckland Uni, and the United Nations Association of New Zealand. So we're experiencing firsthand how the different sectors work in quite different ways. So our aim is to bring together 300 delegates from across all sectors to inform, excite, and mobilise action on the SDGs in New Zealand. And I believe that the discussions that we'll have at this summit will be the first steps towards getting a consensus on what SDGs should be prioritised for New Zealand. So, save the date. It's going to be the 23rd of April at Victoria Uni in Wellington. So we'll make sure you have that on your radar if you'd like to go along. All right. So we now have time for questions and answers from the Kates. I know that Alison will be looking to see if there are any questions on live stream, but are there any questions from you?
Thanks, Kate. That was a fantastic presentation, really, really practical. You mentioned a couple of times about reframing and the common language around sustainability and how the SDGs help with that. Could you talk a little bit about that specifically kind of at the board level, how that sort of helped you cross the line with getting their thinking, because it seems to be about communicating the goals. That was my message from your presentation.
Yeah, I think in the context of the board, both the SDGs and the risk conversation were really important because they were so aligned, so it wasn't foreign language to them in that sense. But it's so much easier to talk about, you know, clean and affordable energy than it is to talk about natural capitals, because that's just a concept that needs a whole lot of explaining, and it comes with a whole lot of, you know, education that's not easy to grasp necessarily. So I think just keeping it well connected to the commercial outcomes of our business, looking at the value propositions and using the goals in that context, reframed the conversation away from this is just an environmental or social kind of fluffy thing to do, and it's nice to do. But once you gave it a real commercial context, using the SDGs and those value opportunities, we kind of went to the next level of engagement. So what was hard originally maybe was some of that cynicism around, oh, you know, is this really something that we need to be spending a lot of time on? Not by all of our directors, some were already there, but we had a couple of the usual cynics in the room. But once I could see the connection through that language between the SDGs and business value and business opportunity, what became hard was not getting them over the line, what became hard was getting them to slow down, because they just wanted to go so quickly and we just didn't, you know, we pushed all the time to go faster, faster, faster. So.
Any more questions?
Oh, I love that little baby.
I'm interested to know, so getting the board on board is one thing, but what about staff and company culture, and how have you sort of addressed
Yeah, so I mean the tone
aspect?
starts from the top, right? So once you've got the board engaged and they're pushing and supporting and providing you with resources to do a whole heap of things, it opens up a wider ability to engage. So we've done a whole lot of things for our staff. I mean, we've created a whole lot of comms internally as well, and have done some SDG sustainability awareness sessions just to get people a general understanding of what it all means. Then we've given our staff opportunities to engage. So we recently sponsored the Climathon. So there was a number of our staff who put their hand up to be involved in a climate hack, and you know how that related to our approach to achieving SDG 13 climate action. So we're finding initiatives all the time that we're building within the business. So yeah, I mean there's through our annual report, through our internal communications, we're making videos around aspects of the goals and what they mean and how they've been translated into action within our business. So sharing stories has been the main thing for engaging our people, and I just can't underemphasise the importance of sharing the story and then continually reinforcing the connections really and what we do every day and how it's helping contribute to this kind of broader purpose and aspiration of delivering on the SDGs. But probably the most recent practical application of that was Climathon and our ability of our staff to get involved in that. We boosted it on social media and within our workplace Facebook. And so people were able to comment, contribute, offer ideas, even if they weren't going to participate in the event itself. There was a huge dialogue in the business around it. So using every opportunity like that. I'm sure there's questions for you too, Kate.
Yeah, well, look, this could be a question to both of you, but and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to articulate this clearly, but one of the things I'm really interested in for businesses, I mean, I think, Kate, you made the point really clearly that when the board recognised the connection to business value and business opportunity, then they could see this as something to engage with.
Yeah.
So what I'm interested in, I mean, let's assume that there were no SDGs. If this is genuinely a business opportunity and there are benefits and value there, you know, what's the sort of connection with, well, let's do it because the SDGs are there, and what's the connection with, well, here's a great opportunity for us as a business. It fits with our market positioning, it fits with what our customers want and what our communities want, so let's do it anyway. And I'm really interested to explore, what's the connection there with the SDGs as a driver that's helping people see things that they haven't seen before.
I mean, we were doing a lot of stuff anyway, and it came through originally in our risk profiling. It was more, we're going to have a number of risks, material risks that we're going to face in our business if we don't anticipate some of these global trends that we're seeing impact on our risk profile. But the SDGs just gave it a really neat and nice, easy framework to put around all of that. And because our board are really, one, future focused, and two, have a real sense of New Zealand Inc., it just really played into their ability to have that conversation at a high level with if governments align, they can have that aligned conversation across government, NGOs and business, and it just became a common language. So everybody has a business language around achieving value, and they do relate to things that the SDGs cover off. I mean, we've been looking at clean and affordable energy for a long time, but to have it prefaced in the framework of the goals just boosted it really. It gave that common language across multiple sectors and multiple parts of, government, business and NGOs. I think that's the value. It's that commonality of approach. And so you feel like you're working together on something in a kind of slightly different context.
Could I offer a couple of kind of views from members? So how it's played out for some of them has been actually coming back to a broader conversation about purpose. Mm-hmm. So how does everything that we know that's important to our people, to our stakeholders, roll up into that more strongly? And that's, when you start to see that playing out in a more grassroots level as well. And then the other angle is around this longer term thinking. So how far out are you thinking strategically? For a lot of businesses, not so far. But what's kind of spurring them to look at that kind of more longer term view has been climate change. What are our climate targets? Is this aligned with 2 degrees? That kind of makes you extend your line of sight a bit longer. So if you can start to, some businesses have been looking at actually this is a 2030 strategy for the world. It's already there. They've done the hard work. In terms of our business purpose and why we're here, how can that align? So it's kind of playing out in different ways. I think the Better Business, Better World report talks about the need to think about business and do business in a different way. Yeah. And it's kind of, because it's not framed around the greeniness of it all and the benefit that you stand to gain. It's a compelling read. It's written in business language, but it's quite aspirational, and it really kind of touches around what it means for people and leadership and how that needs to play out in a business context.
Yeah, I mean, Philippe Chabert came out last week and gave a talk through EY, and he's the head of the energy sector, I think, of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and he's very clear that business as usual is dead. And so if all the frameworks and that you had to sort of navigate business through are kind of not applicable anymore, what's your new anchor? And the goals offer some kind of new anchor for that forward and future looking strategy.
One final question. There weren't any from the live stream crowd, but Sophie, Adele at 3R would like to talk to you about the internship programme. And New Zealand Post.
And Vector. Just while we're on it.
All right, so we're not going to let you go without doing some work. So the purpose of this session has been all about helping you think about how you're going to push Go. So for the next 5 minutes, we'd like you to work in small groups, maybe between 2 and 4. We'd like you to discuss, of the different options that have been talked about today, which of these feels like the most useful for connecting the SDGs for your business right now? And then what are you going to do to progress this opportunity? So for example, it could be a person that you need to talk to, a person that you need to influence. It could be an area that you need to undertake more research on. It could be a tool that you'd like to use, or it could be handing your business card to Sophie to get more, to look at the opportunity to mobilise youth on the SDGs. For the live stream audience, we invite you to do this thinking and post your ideas in the chat box for us. So we'd just like to spend 5 minutes doing that, and then we'll have a quick check-in and wrap up, please. Okay. I can hear all the answers. I can hear the partnerships and the mobilisation forming. This is fantastic. You guys are just coming up with the answers. We're going to be there sooner than 2030. Bring it on. Fantastic. Would anyone like to share how they're going to push Go, or some of the things that they talked about?
We kind of went off a little bit of a side tangent and back and forth. That's me though. Probably one area which kind of discussed SDGs are, we all understand them. You go to someone on the street and, well, what do they mean? We had the example of someone goes into Otahu, they will talk about the SDGs, the people on the street there, but in a different way. So how we communicate it to our customers, so from the warehouse communicating to customers, we don't use the 7 goals and the pretty pictures. We talk about it in the customer's language.
Their value proposition.
And their value propositions. And probably the other one, which we talked about very briefly at the end, is transparency. The kind of thing was, if everyone's reporting against these, how are people going to report about them? How can we compare them across other organisations? And transparency, there's a slow-growing push, but there's not really a whole lot happening in that space. I've got to say, Carbon Disclosure Project, 13 out of 50 NZX 50 companies actually respond to that, and CDP is kind of the standard for international disclosure on carbon, but only 13 New Zealand companies of the big ones did. So transparency is pretty slow coming as well. So key points, talk to it how your consumers actually understand it, and if you're going to commit to it, have your KPIs out there and actually make them very transparent.
There was one bit in the middle, actually, that I think that the point that this gentleman made, Simon made, good name, which is, communicating to your customers is one thing, and making sure you're talking their language, so maybe talking about poverty rather than, SDG 2 for people in different places. But then what the SDGs provide is a common and agreed sort of global framework for people who are interested in this, whether that's boards or senior leaders or local governments, for example, where we can actually talk in a similar language. And then the transparency sort of provides that accountability. So you've got those sort of 3 different layers that all come together, actually, I think. So, maybe we did better than we thought.
On reflection.
Thank you. So I think, the measurement piece is something that kind of pops up a lot. So what we've got at the moment is this kind of really interesting time where we've got these global goals and outcomes with their targets and their metrics and their indicators. And then we've got businesses who are kind of going, we need to be able to measure the impact of our work because it's essential to our business to know what our outcomes are. What we don't have at the moment is this kind of bit in the middle that brings us all together in more of a national context around the SDGs. So I would not be surprised if a key point of discussion at the summit in April is actually what does that need to look like? So, the conversation around the priorities and what they are will probably play out first, but the secondary piece will be how do we create tracking whether we're, having value, having impact. What does the transparency piece need to look like? So, I'm personally really excited about that summit because I think that is absolutely the right platform to do that. It'll have voices from all the sectors in the room, and it's kind of like an SDG 17 partnerships for the goals piece. All right. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for your input as ever. It's great to see you. Thanks to the live stream audience for joining us. Thanks to Vector and the team for sharing all of the gold. And yeah, I look forward to hearing how you're all going to push Go or continue to keep going. So thanks, everyone.